Hi, everyone. I'm Connie Sproul. I'm a Feng Shui master, and I own the Feng Shui Institute of America. I'm going to attempt to, I'm new at Google Hangout, so I'm going to attempt to uh, give you information that will change your life if you listen carefully and think deeply. You will have a very good understanding of about the science of why Feng Shui works. I'm going to start, first of all, on part one. I'm going to give you some definitions so that you can understand where, when I talk about why I'm talking to you about it, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. And then the last part of this session, I'm going to show you some slides that will give you some visuals to which you can refer to when you're trying to analyze your own space as we begin this journey together. But like I said, I'm going to give you a couple of definitions here. One is I use the dragonfly as a symbol for living my life because it's about transformation. And even though you might think you fail at something, you can turn around and come back and try it again or do it differently, and you reincarnate the success of it. So, and I love that analogy. So just so that you can also put the same analogy in your mind, I want you to listen to this. The dragonfly in almost every part of the world symbolizes changes in the perspective of self-realization, the kind of change that has its source in mental and emotional maturity and understanding of the deeper meaning of life. The magical property of iridescence in its wings is also associated with the discovery of one's own abilities by unmasking the real self and removing the doubts one casts on his or her own sense of identity. This directly means self-discovery and removal of inhibitions. Excuse me. Intentions. We're going to talk a lot about intentions today, mainly starting with mine and how I realize them, and then I'm going to take you in very slowly on understanding how connecting intentions with Feng Shui adjustments in your home can make a very powerful statement for you. Intentions appears to be something akin to a tuning fork. And I love that analogy because causing the tuning forks of other things in the universe to resonate at the same frequency. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to all of us? It means that if our intentions are positive and our intentions are focused on good things in life, that the whole universe is going to resonate the same for us, and we're going to get back what we send out. That's another definition of law of attraction. Now, I also want to give you a definition of epigenetics. We're going to talk about epigenetics because it is the science about why Feng Shui works. It's a new science, and it has, over the last 10 years, morphed into from epigenetics to behavioral epigenetics, which is a study of how our physical environment affects how we react to any situation in life. Epigenetics is the science of human empowerment through the research of Dr. Bruce Lipton and other leading scientists. Their stunning new discoveries have been made about the interaction between our mind and body, and how when the physical environment is changed within that laboratory in the petri dish, that the protein in our cells change, and so does our outlook in life. We are a petri dish full of cells. And if we change our physical environment to reflect things that support our goals and our intentions in life, then that's what the universe is going to resonate about for us. Now, let me give you the definition of Feng Shui. Feng Shui is the study and application of how our physical environment becomes a metaphor for our living spaces. In other words, the symbols and the placements of them in our homes and workplaces predict our futures and our successes and our failures, as well as our relationships and much, much more. Now, those are very powerful definitions that you need to think about as I go through some of the things I'm going to tell you. I'd like to first start by helping you understand how I came from a meager upbringing to being thrown into poverty, and then within 9 months after that poverty situation, I was able to realize a six-figure income, which is absolutely unheard of back in the 70s or the 80s. So yes, it is something that we want to be able to, I want to be able to communicate and show you how to do this. First of all, and I apologize as many times as I have done this recording to rehearse for this, for some reason, my dog has got back in the house, but we will just continue on because I want to get this done for you. In any event, when I was a very young child, I was born in Tennessee and came up through the West Virginia, Kentucky area. And I lived in West Virginia for until I was almost 5 years old. But in the meantime, I had young siblings and I had twin brothers a year older than me. And my parents worked in another state because that's where the jobs were. And it seemed like every time my parents came home, they had a new baby. For me, this was just this was a wonderful thing for me because I thought they were bringing baby dolls home for me to play with. And so that was my first exposure to taking care of my siblings. And eventually those skills grew into helping me eventually start my own business years ago. So as each child came home, each new sibling came home, I got to learn how to change the diapers, and I got to hold it and take care of it and love it and all the little things that little girls like to do when they're playing with baby dolls. Well, as I got older and we finally got to move back into the state where my parents lived, we lived under the same roof. My grandmother was still the main caretaker while both my parents worked because there were 6 children and our incomes were not really high during that time in my life. So what happened though in living in this new house that they bought was I felt very crowded because it was a story and a half in the home, and all the kids slept upstairs. The twin brothers slept in the stair landing with their 2 beds, and all 4 sisters, we slept in the same bed. Very crowded. I started to get a feeling really not like myself because seemed like I just couldn't move. I just couldn't think. I couldn't be happy. And at that time, I didn't realize it, but I was probably getting depressed because it was a tough life. Anyway, I started drawing pictures and hanging pictures on the wall of things that I wanted to have. I wanted to build a balcony off of our bedroom so that I could go outside at night and sit there and watch the stars or sit out and just watch nature. The other tool that I used when I was a child was our swing set. I would go outside to the swing set and I would get on that swing and I would start swinging back and forth and back and forth. And that rhythmic movement would start putting me into, I didn't realize this at the time, but it put me into a meditative state. And I would start dreaming about all the things I wanted to do and have and experience. And this would go on for all through the warm months of the year. And at night, I would come, when it was bedtime, my siblings were asleep, I would keep the light on, and I would look across the walls in the bedroom, and I would look at all the pictures that I drew and begin to visualize and feel and experience throughout my whole body what it would be like if I could actually achieve those goals. As life moved on, I got a little older. I graduated from high school, and later I got married. I didn't realize till about 2 weeks after I was married that I married an alcoholic, and I spent close to 5 years in a very violent marriage. I did have 2 children as a result of that marriage, and before that 5 years was up, I was divorced, and that threw me into poverty. I was living homeless. I was homeless. I was living with friends and then with family members, waiting for my name to come up on a subsidized housing program where I could get my own space again and live with my 2 daughters. Eventually that happened. I had to apply for food stamps because I had to feed my little girls. And somewhere in between there, I got a job as a secretary. Never had a job before, a real job, because as a child, as a young adolescent, I babysat to make money. And of course, that fit right into my skill sets because I was caring for my siblings throughout my younger ages. I mean, 3, 4, and 5 years old, this is when I was doing that. And I turned it kind of into a business, and I had a lot of customers. I used to, when I was babysitting for someone and they needed another babysitter, they needed me for the same night, I would offer one of my sisters who were getting a little older and could handle certain age groups of children, and then they would pay me and I would pay my sisters. But one of the things I learned about that was I paid them exactly what I was getting paid, and I never took any commission out for myself. So I didn't make much money when they babysat. I only made money when I babysat. So that was a lesson learned, that when I come back to my business experience later on, you'll see what I did to make up for all of that in the past. But those skills stayed with me, and I was able to get a job as a secretary at a timber company, a wholesale company that sold telephone poles, railroad ties, and bridge timbers, as well as pier timbers and things like that. I didn't know anything about that industry. Construction was the last thing in the world I ever thought I'd see myself involved in. I wanted to go back and sell the things that I used to make, and dresses and clothes and pictures and paints, my art and that kind of thing. But that wasn't going to support 2 daughters. So I stayed there for a while, and the office manager, a woman that had been there for quite some time, taught me everything that she knew about how to buy the lumber, how to sell the lumber, where to go to get the shipping, all about the how it's treated and things like that. And she was a good mentor for me. So that was important, that I had somebody who identified, because apparently she used to be a single parent at one time. Single mother, and with neither one of us ever getting child support hardly at all, I listened to what she said. But she had been with the company a while, and it was owned by an elderly guy that had owned it for 10 or 15, 20 years. And during the time I was working there, he passed away. The grandson also worked within the company, and we had an accountant that was there most of the time. Anyway, when he passed away, my mentor left the company, and I was left there with the accountant, the grandson, and myself. And it was obvious that there had to be somebody else in the sales position that was vacated by the grandfather when he died. I requested to be put in that position because I felt like I knew pretty much what I was doing, as I had helped bid on the contracts, calculate the board feet for the shipping, everything. But that wasn't to be. The grandson, who really did not want the responsibility, I think, of running the company, decided he was going to hire another person, and it was obviously another guy. It was not a woman or a young woman, and he asked me to train him. So I said, well, why would you not also consider putting me in sales, because you'd have 2 salespeople? And his statement to me was, at this time, he's married, his wife is expecting, and he has to support his family. And I'm thinking, okay, I have 2 daughters. They are live and breathing. They aren't baby dolls. I'm not sure what he thought how I was supporting my daughters, because he was only paying me a salary of $5,000 a year. That is awful. I mean, today you can't even get public assistance that's like that. I mean, oh, it's just awful. But anyway, I stuck around knowing that I was going to leave after that statement was made to me. I knew I had some vacation pay, a couple weeks, and I also knew I was going to have some minor surgery that was going to keep me out for about 6 weeks, and I had sick pay. So I chose to have the surgery, and while I was recuperating, I spent time at the public library looking up, because we didn't have faxes, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have computers, we didn't have electric typewriter, we didn't have any of that stuff. So I was pretty much spending all my days at the library making copies of suppliers, treating plants, contractors that worked with the government, that did huge projects that I could bid on, because I knew how to do that. That's what I was used to doing, working as a secretary in this company for about a year. It took me that long to learn everything. So when I was ready to supposedly return back to work, I did go back in and I gave my notice, and then I never looked back because I ended up about a mile down the street from where this company operated. A friend of a friend had referred me to someone who needed a person to manage his little office building that had about 12 offices to rent, to show it, to rent it out, whatever, and to be available to answer phones. And I worked out a deal where if he would allow me to run my business from there in one of the offices, I would help him out. And that's how I got started in my business. I had no money. I was dating then, and eventually ended up marrying the gentleman I married, but my business was running before that happened. So what's interesting is, if I can digress here a moment, when I graduated from high school, I had this, this memory book that they give you. And in the back, it asks you what your goals were for your future. Well, I had 4 or 5 written down. The ones I remember were, I wanted to own my own business. I wanted to be making $100,000 a year. I wanted to be able to, I wanted to be happily married, and I wanted to have a big family. Well, after my divorce, I thought to myself, "Shoot, I'm not going to have a big family because I only have 2 daughters and I can't have any more children. And I'm just going in a direction that I hadn't expected to go. I don't know anybody that I could think of that would make me happy if I married them. So I had made up my mind I was going to be a single mother for most of my life. But during that time that I was working as a secretary, my car fell apart, and I met a gentleman who managed a service station across the street from where I worked. And it seemed like every time I turned around, I was in there getting some part or piece put on my car. And eventually, my bill was so high, and he knew I was a single mother, and he knew that I couldn't afford to pay the bill, so he paid it. I didn't know that until after, a long time afterwards. But the story goes, and everyone laughs about this, that my bill was so high that I had to marry the manager of the service station because I couldn't afford to pay my bill on the repairs for my car. So that's kind of funny. But anyway, as I started working and running my business, I took all that information I gathered from the library, and I put it in I typed one little letter, and then I went to a copy place and I copied it. And I think I probably went to the library and copied the letter over and over again. I would have changed the date when I was ready to copy more letters, and I would send them out. So overall, over a 2 to 3 month period, I ended up mailing around 1,000 letters. And I took what little bit of money I had in my checking account and bought the stamps and the paper and, well, the envelopes, because the papers came out of the copy machine wherever I copied them. And during that time, I started getting little inquiries to bid on jobs. Now, in the industrial construction area, jobs are not they're not little. They're a little job is 100,000. A big job is in the multi-million dollars. Well, I was going for some little jobs like timbers for making a little walking bridge over top of a creek at a park. That might have been $3,000 or $4,000, or something to replace guard posts that were knocked down, and they would be treated wood to keep them from rotting. Those are the kind of things I was getting, and I thought, I cannot make a living doing this. I got to do some big stuff. So I went back to what I was doing at the other company, and that was looking at all the bids that were going out and making calls to various agencies, government agencies, to get the list of the contractors that were bidding on various projects. And then I would offer to bid on the timber, the large timber parts of that contract. And I got one. I got one that was close to $1 million, and I couldn't believe it. And I thought, now what am I going to do? I have to go out and finance this project. And I don't think I can do this. And I thought, no, don't say that to yourself. We're going to think positive. You are going to get this contract, and you're going to be able to finance it. Well, the first thing I had to do was find out the credit rating of the customer I was going to be dealing with. So I called the treating plant that I like to work with most when I worked at the other company, and I asked them if they would check the credit of this contractor, and if it turned out to be really good credit, then this treating plant and I were going to be doing some big business. So they got back to me a couple days later, and they said that the credit of that contractor was better than their credit, and they had pretty good credit themselves. So that's how we entered into that contract. So, and they were going to front me 6 truckloads of timber at a time. As long as I paid for it, then they'd ship the next one. I thought, okay, that's not going to help me on this one. I'm going to have to ship out as much as they need when they need it. So then I took the contract, I took it to 4 banks. I was turned down by every bank for the dumbest reason, and I bet you women out there might be able to identify with this. They asked me to have my husband come in and sign on the loan papers, and I said, I don't have a husband. I am single. And not only that, eventually they would have found out that I was a single mother, not making very much money. So I didn't have any collateral. I didn't have any debt either, but I didn't have anything other than that $1 million contract to give them. Now, if it was a man, they wouldn't even blink their eye. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, it would not have been an issue, but it certainly was for me. So I had to come up with another way to finance this contract. And the way my mind thinks is, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to find a swing and we're going to think about this and solve this problem. So back and forth I went, and I just started doodling on paper. There's got to be, I have to see how this plays out. I've got to picture in my mind exactly how this is going to happen and how I'm going to feel when I get there. And I am just going to act as if that I'm already there, and I'm going to talk just like I know what I'm doing, which I did, although I was scared to death about $1 million contract. That's certainly different than getting $10 for babysitting or $30 for cosmetics or something that I was selling. It was different, but it was exciting and I loved it. So I picked up the phone, called the customer, and I said, listen, I've gone to my bank and they like the idea that I have this contract, but I'm overextended on my line of credit right now because of a couple other projects I'm working on. If I offered you an extra 1% on top of the 2% discount that normally is paid in the construction industry, if you pay your bills in 10 days or less, would you be willing to pay me in that amount of time? And he said, I'll get back with you. So apparently he had to talk with his accountant, his partners or whatever, and he went to the bank, came back a couple days later, called me and said, I got it all lined up. Whatever I don't cover, I have my own line of credit. I said, okay. So we started shipping. In over 18 months, we shipped a little under $1 million worth of products. And then during that time, the contract was expanded, so it exceeded $1 million. And what we were doing was supplying huge timbers that were 34, 40 feet long, that were almost 3 feet square, that they used to build bunkers where they tested explosives. So I thought, wow, I didn't know I was doing all that. So I contributed in some way to the strength of our militaries way back then. But that's how I got that job, and it put me on the map. And I did not look back after that. Of course, now let me tell you what I did with my money. Every time he paid me within that 10 days, I actually got his check within probably 3 days after I invoiced him. And what we did was we shipped everything that needed to go out on a Friday. And the truckers would drive over the weekend because the lumber was coming from deep south and from the West Coast. And then when they got the timber, when the day that the timber shipped, I called the contractor and said, here's the amount of your invoices and this is how much is shipping. So he would know to go to the bank on Monday and let his bank know that he needs to transfer a certain amount of money so that he can be ready to pay my invoices within 10 days or less. So by Tuesday, he had the money. He mailed me a check. By Thursday or Friday, I had the money. And I put it in, are you ready for this? even though the banks were charging up to 18 to 20% on loans to businesses, there were money markets out there that were paying 18 to 20% on money you put into their accounts. So I would take my checks of anywhere from 60 to 100,000 and put them in the money market. And in the meantime, the treating plant's always 30 days behind in invoicing me. So I would have 30 days to float that money. They would send me the invoice, and then a couple of days later, I would cut them a check. In the meantime, I'm growing this money in this money market. So I was excited. I was learning. I was so excited. I thought I'd never worked this way before. I've always worked with $10 or $5 or $3, and here I'm working with hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that contract, yes, it put me on the map. I stayed in the industry for probably 5 years until the recession finally hit the construction industry, and then my suppliers were selling to my customers, and that cut me out because I was a wholesaler. Well, I thought, wow, anybody that was in my situation as a single parent, on food stamps and dealing with how to make a living and dealing with possible failure, I had nothing else to lose. So I went for the gusto, and I just I just hit that home run, and it worked for me. So during all this time, I told you that I got married. I married a man who was divorced and had custody of his 3 children. So I got to combine his 3 young ones with my 2 young ones, and then we had a family of 5, and we've been married now 38 years, and all of our children are grown, and we have lots of grandchildren. So I check mark on all those things that I set forth and I thought about all the time. I made my 6-figure income. I started my own business. I found the true love of my life. I had my big family. So I was really happy. And all of these, what I did not realize was that I was actually practicing behavioral epigenetics. So what I want to do is show you some slides, and this will be the second half of part 1, and so that you can visualize what I'm talking about, the science of how this works. So give me a minute. Let me get these slides up, and we will, okay, we'll start the slideshow. Okay, what I'm going to talk to you about is behavioral epigenetics, and it is the science of why Feng Shui works. And waiting for this slide to open. Okay. Let me give you some resources and some references so that you can look them up if you like, because it will substantiate anything I'm going to tell you about Feng Shui. I met Dr. Bruce Lipton years ago, 1999, and was introduced to what he called harmonic convergence, as well as the understanding of molecular cell biology. And at the time, I can't remember at the time if that's what he called it, epigenetics, but they were still, I guess they had, in the past few years before I met him, at a conference and had an opportunity to have a lengthy conversation with him, Dr. Candace Pert, Dr. Bruce Lipton, and many, many other concentrated on working in discovering. They were researching DNA, and they were stem cell researchers. And when somebody came up with the idea, well, if we need to find out what's going on here, we've got to figure out how to get rid of the mutant cells in the DNA so that they don't cause cancer, and they don't they don't cause other illnesses that we can't control. And as a result of that, they discovered that, well, why don't we test the protein in the cells? And that's what Dr. Bruce Lipton and Dr. Candace Pert participated in. I'm also going to introduce you to what's called a Feng Shui hold-on concept. And that was developed by Nancy Lee Vidra, the founder of the Feng Shui Institute of America. And this is Nancy Lee. She founded the school in the early 90s, and when she retired, I took the school over. And this is Dr. Lipton's most sought after book, The Biology of Belief. This is where you're going to learn about the epigenetics and the behavior epigenetics. And Dr. Candace Pert's book, I don't have it on this particular slide, but her famous book is called Molecules of Emotion. Molecules of Emotions. Look it up on Amazon. You'll find that to be quite fascinating. Now, here are some other things I want to share with you too. The hold-on model is on the right, and I'm going to go into detail about this later on in the slideshow, but I want to talk to you a little bit about how our brain works. We have, if you look at the back of the brain on this slide on the left, that's our neocortex, and that's like a computer processor. We put everything in there, but nothing comes out until we take it out. The limbic system, which is in the frontal part of the brain that controls all the emotions, is where if you want to evoke emotion in a customer, a client, a child, a lover, anybody, then that's the part of the brain that you talk to and use words that you know will trigger the emotions that you're looking for. If you look at the white, creamy white colored stem, that's the brain stem, and that's where our subconscious is. And whether you realize it or not, we only use 5% of our conscious mind we operate. That's how much we use, and sometimes less than that. So, and what we're doing is, it's sort of like the left brain. We're pulling out things that are in our processor that we do to operate and to conduct our business and talk to people. But the stem cell is our subconscious. And our subconscious actually operates everything, 95% of everything else that we do without us even realizing. I mean, we get up in the morning and we stand on our 2 feet and we walk. We don't even think about it. We breathe in and out. We don't even think about it. If someone asks you to give you a telephone number of someone that you both know, and you can't think about it, but if you pick up your phone, you can punch in the numbers. That's your subconscious working for you because it's automatically been programmed already. And that's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. Now, let's go into epigenetics a little bit. Epi means above, which means in the genetic control environment, epigenetics controls the above the genes or anything coming from the environment. And you're going to see this word here, methylation, a couple times in the presentation in the part 1 and part 2. All that word is a scientific word that's used in the laboratory about reading the epigenetics and reading the DNA. That's methylation is all about reading what's going on. So we're going to talk about the signal of self. And so where does the signal of self come from? Ask yourself, where does it come from? Where do I get this stuff that I don't want in my mind, my body? Where does it come from? First of all, it starts with your intentions that you send out. And here's an example of what you shouldn't do, and then I'll give you an alternative. A lot of people state their intentions the wrong way. They use negative words, which all that does is bring more attention to what you want to get away from. For instance, if you want to be financial independent, so you're going to say, I'm not going to be in debt anymore. Well, okay, there's a negative, not going. I'm not going, and you have the word debt. So how about getting well? I won't be sick anymore. Well, you're still giving attention to the word sick, and you're using a negative. I don't want to be alone. If it comes to attracting an intimate person in your life, you're saying the word alone. Get it out of your vocabulary. Get the debt out of your vocabulary. Get sick out of your vocabulary. Here's a better way to say it. If you want to be financially independent and not be in debt anymore, then what does that mean to you? Ask yourself the question, what does it mean? And come up with an emotional feeling. It means freedom to do what you want, doesn't it? I have the freedom to do what I want. That's an affirmation. It's stated in the positive. All the cells in my body are happy and healthy. I learned that when I was taking yoga. It's an affirmation to maintain health, good health, and keep me happy. Attracting relationships are easy. It's easy for me. Instead of saying I don't want to be alone, I attract relationships, good relationships, happy relationships. Put happy stuff in it. Put positive words in what you're saying. Okay, lots of people think that DNA makes us who we are. That's not the case. You're going to learn something new. It's going to be a surprise here. DNA never changes. It waits for changes in its blueprint. DNA is just a blueprint. It's there in our genes, yes. And yes, there are some mutant genes in there that get passed on by our ancestors. They're all there. We all have it. But unless we acknowledge that it's there, we refuse to, and then we refuse to read it. If we acknowledge it, it's going to show up eventually. It's just like, well, in my family, heart disease. It seems like everybody I know dies from heart disease. Of course, we were raised with eating things that lent to that, but I refuse to latch on to that. I'm not going to die of heart disease. I know how to prevent that in my mind, body, and spirit. So I am changing how my genes read the blueprint because I'm changing the blueprint. So just remember that DNA is only a blueprint that changes when protein is affected by its environment. So, and if we have protein, if we're nothing but cell and protein, then that means that what's in our physical environment can change the reading of the blueprint to be positive, and that's what we want. So imagine yourself as a petri dish with skin. Here we are on the left, all happy and healthy, and everything's going just fine with us because we have not allowed anything to get into our mind, body, and spirit to program us any differently. Now, if you're one of those people who take to heart all the bad things that people say to you about you, if you have clutter all around your home and you're having breathing problems and your pathways are blocked and you can't seem to get anywhere in life, well, hello, message. How about cleaning the clutter? How about taking out all the, just put in the furniture that you need. Don't just put everything under the sun in a room. You have to have room to spread out, to move around, to focus on your dreams and not everybody else's. Okay, a protein's life path is very interesting. You put a protein and a cell into a test tube. It doesn't have any life or any control until you change the environment. And then when you change the environment, if you look at this picture on the right with all the happiness in the cell, the protein in the cell equals life and happiness. It's all about how we read what is in our environment. So here's that word again, that methylation equals how a protein reads the environment. Methylation equals how we as people read the environment. We are changing our whole body makeup by what we expose ourselves to. So what makes it work? We got to turn the switch on. And who's the switch? What's the switch? Feng Shui is the switch. That's how we help our clients. We give them the switch. Once they learn the concepts of Feng Shui and the science of why it works, things change miraculously in their lives. And this is what happy cells look like. They're having a party, they're entertaining everyone, they're just having a good old time. Imagine these are the cells in your body because you now know where the switch is. Now remember that DNA by itself never changes. It's just the blueprint. We want to keep our cells healthy within our bodies, and we want to make sure that we feed our proteins in our cells with a healthy physical environment. So we are the switch. Actually, Feng Shui is a switch and you turn it on. This is my little princess with her magic wand. She's turning on the good environment for us. And here's a very good visual I put together. I was trying to figure out how could I explain this to you and not being in front of you other than putting this little picture together. So I created this slide. You have to make up your mind and know that the body controls the signal, that the switch, the signal, the switch, whatever you want to call it. So you have to make up your mind if you want to be happy because you found the switch and now you're going to move forward, or you're going to receive all the negative stuff and die because of your own fears, and not be happy. You have to make that decision, and it starts with stating your intentions correctly, and it starts with acting as if, so you can experience what it's going to be like. You'll know, so when you get there, you don't have to guess what you have to do because you'll know. And do know that we control those signals through our five senses, and I'm going to talk to you about that in length here as we move forward. Okay, we process our environment through our five senses. We have five input and we have five output. So let's talk about this. Our skin, our sense of touch, our skin is our largest organ in the body. What our skin does is it has memories. So whatever you put on it chemically that has any chemicals in it is absorbed by our cells and our protein within our body, and it can affect how we are going to react in the long run. We process our environment, 95% of us do, or 95% of our environment is processed through our sense of sight. Some people don't have a sense of sight for whatever reason, so they compensate by expanding the ability of other senses that they have. It's funny how the body can make up for that. So be careful what you see and what you put in front of you and what you read every day, and subliminally you don't know it's there and it's in the wrong place, or you have, just like clutter, you trip over it day in and day out, and all of a sudden you're having problems running into brick walls at the office. You're not getting the opportunities for promotion. Clutter is one of the worst sins you can have in your home. Also remember that taste and the sense of smell take us back to our past, because our cultures, the food that we're used to eating, there's certain aromas that we equate to happiness and sadness in our life. So bring in the ones that keep us happy. And of course, expose yourself to wonderful things that you like to hear. Music that's bouncy, that makes you happy. A music that heals, a music that gets you in a meditative state. Stay away from music such as, and some of you probably won't like this, but if you read the water books by Emoto, he will tell you that hard rock does horrible things to your insides. All you have to do is put a glass of water in front of a speaker when hard metal rock is playing, and you'll see what he's talking about. You should get his books. Okay, just like the previous picture showed, we have a certain type of energy, and in Feng Shui, most people refer to that as qi. Well, qi is kind of it's very abstract to try to describe. Just like with energy, there's so many different types of energy. How do you describe it to anyone other than using a specific item that you're talking about? But we refer to qi as life's vitality. So when you have a stimulus in your environment, you're going to have a like response from that stimulus. When you input something into your environment and into your mind, body, spirit, the only thing you can take out of that processor is what you input. So your output will be the same. If you receive things that come into your environment and your mind, bodies, and spirit, then it's going to affect change in your mind, body experience. And if your environmental signals, just know that these signals that you bring into your environment through your five senses affect your behavior, and that's how you're going to be seen by others, by what you have in your environment. Now, I told you I'd talk to you about the hold-on concept, and just so you know, a definition of a hold-on is a system of systems. The universe that we live in is a system, and each planet and each moon, each star, each sun, is a system in itself. But when you put us all together, the planets, everything, then we become a holon. We are a system of systems. So is our mind, body, and spirit. We are a system of systems. So I'm going to give you a very quick rundown on how to use a holon. If anyone knows anything about the Maslow hierarchy of needs, if you look at this, or if you even understand how it works, if something is missing in one of the levels, then we're not operating at full capacity for whatever reason. I had a client who wanted to move out onto her own and start her own business. And she was very insecure about doing it, very fearful of it because she didn't think she had it in her to do it because of working for other companies, and she saw all the problems they were going through. Well, the first thing I wanted to do was find out, was it realistic for her to do this based on her talents, her skills, her exposure, and the people that she knew? And identified that yes, it was. The market was there for her. She just had to believe that it was there. Did she have an accurate picture of her accomplishments now in the past? And if she had all the resources available to her, could she do it on her own? And she did. Now, when I get up to the discounting of attributes, this is where her problem was, and which overflowed onto her fear of trying to do it. So when we study this a little further, I focused on helping her understand that she shouldn't discount her attributes, because she showed me in the lower two levels that she had everything that was needed. And and I'm a good example. If you don't need money, if you want to make it, you'll find a way. And I did. So we worked on her discounting her attributes and turned those around. And so if in Feng Shui, we call this a breakdown. If we fix the breakdown, then we can change the environment, and we're done. It changes her whole future. It's a simple little concept. Okay, we're coming to the end, and I just want you to know that what we've learned today, some of the things we've discussed, that cells respond to the culture media that it is put in. So the culture media, in this case, could be blood, and if we have some type of a disease that has attacked the blood, then it attacks the cells. And then then the blueprint, the DNA blueprint, reads it as being sick, and the next thing you know, somebody has cancer. So that's the process. If we change the chemical culture within the medium in the cells, then we control what happens in our bodies. And we can do this through our five senses: visual, sound, taste, touch, smell. The environment controls perception and the interpretation of our environment. And then when the mind interprets it, it sends a message to the brain, and then the brain releases a chemical that matches the interpretation, and then it sends it to the blood or the nervous system. And as a result, these signals control the behavior and the gene activity. So you have to think of yourself as a skin-covered petri dish. Okay. We do read our environment with our nervous system. That's through our five senses. I hope I've drilled that down to you. When we express fear, we release a completely different chemical. Fear stops the cells from growing. So if you're going in for a job interview, or you want to close a sale and you're nervous and you start saying all these negative things, or you don't think you can do it, it shuts down everything, and the fear just stops everything, and you can't do it. So tell yourself different things. Oh, I can get through this. I know how to do this. I have my script down. I know exactly what to do, when to ask the questions, and when to close. That's all you got to keep saying. So I tell my clients, do not read headlines in the paper. Do not listen to the news, and do not stay around toxic people, because all this stops cells from growing and multiplying. They affect who you are, what you're going to do, and where you're going to go. So change your environment and change your life. Cancer is a consequence of a disturbance in the environment and the perception of that disturbance, as I mentioned earlier. So keep in mind, stay healthy, keep positive thoughts around you. And behavioral epigenetics is all about how to nurture and shape our genes. And we are self-receptors, self-receivers, and we respond to our environmental signals. So always, always remember that. From now on, you're going to be looking at your space, I hope, with new eyes. And here's what we're going to cover in part 2 when you come back to me. The epigenetics of the home, the self, and the intentions. And what we will cover in this lesson is the symbology in our homes and the messages that are sent to our cellular makeup, the thresholds, pathways, doors, entries, the hierarchy of placement. Also, we're going to talk about how Feng Shui changes the cellular structure in the body based on certain things that you bring in, the role of DNA as it connects to the symbols in your home, what it might be doing, signals that change the composition. And when we're finished, you will know where Feng Shui fits into the formula. So get ready for a really great part 2, and I am looking forward to helping you become a new person and reach all of your goals. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.